Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and last week I posted a video about the Facebook privacy lawsuit and why I am opting out of it. This week I thought I would do a follow-up based on some of the comments that I got from all of you, and a lot of comments came in asking me why am I even bothering to opt out given how difficult it is to sue Facebook on my own. And my answer to that is that I have no intention of suing Facebook on my own, at least right now. It's about the principle of the whole thing and why I think consumers need to take a bigger stand against abuse from corporations and lawyers. And in this case, we're getting abused by both the corporations and the lawyers. And we're going to look at another Facebook class action lawsuit that went in a very different direction because the case had a judge that stood up for consumers. Let's get to it. Now, I heard from a number of viewers who wrote in talking about a face recognition lawsuit that Facebook went through a year or two ago. William Hughes here, along with a number of other people who wrote in, received a check for $384 as the result of that lawsuit. And this was a class action suit very similar to what we've been talking about on this privacy class action that I'm opting out of. But there were some key differences here. The first is that this lawsuit only pertained to people who live in Illinois. It was a state law that prohibited the kinds of activities that Facebook was doing with facial recognition data. Facebook wanted the case to go to federal court where it was heard, and the judge there took over the case and was threatening to bring it to trial unless the parties came up with a good solution. And they initially came up with a $550 million settlement, but the judge rejected it. The judge here is named James Donato of California, who was in charge of the case, and he said the payout was woefully inadequate. He said it's $550 million, that's a lot, but the question is it really a lot? And the judge was concerned that members of the class were only going to receive about $150 each under this initial settlement agreement. He didn't think that was nearly enough, especially given what the Illinois law called for when damages were to be assessed for one of these violations. And so he told the parties, go back and negotiate and get a better offer for this class, or I'm going to force this to go to trial. And of course, neither Facebook or the class action attorneys wanted this to go to trial because it would be very expensive and time-consuming to do so. So he put the order to the parties to figure out something better. They came back and added $100 million to the settlement. And that wasn't all, because the judge also narrowed the scope of the immunity that Facebook was asking for future litigation and narrowed things down to just what this case involved. And by the way, this is the opposite of what's happening in the case that we talked about last week, in that the case settlement was broadened to go well beyond just the one incident of Cambridge Analytica to include all instances of Facebook sharing data from 2007 to 2022, a very broad scope of immunity that Facebook gets for the settlement here out of every single member of the class unless they opt out. In this case, the judge said, no, we're going to narrow it down to just what this lawsuit is about. And if something happened on Instagram, as you can see at the bottom of the order there, that would be a separate case and people would have their rights still with that. So he looked out for not only the money here, but also the rights of the consumers impacted so they could sue over other bad behavior in the future. He also worked very hard to ensure that people got a proper notice. And one of the things that we talked about with this Apple device settlement check a few weeks ago was that they only sent out email notices and they had no idea whether or not people actually got them. They couldn't verify if it landed in an inbox or a spam bucket. In this case, the judge made sure that anything that went to spam found its way to the users in another way. So what they discovered in the course of sending out these notifications was that 5.7 million emails that were sent to Gmail accounts went to spam, and he required them to do better and make sure they got the notice out to more people. Another thing that he did was reduce the amount that the lawyers got. So as you can see here, they awarded $97.5 million in attorney's fees, which is still a lot of money, but this is only 15% of the settlement amount, not the 25% that the lawyers in the other case we looked at last week will be getting. But the judge in the case didn't stop there. He was very concerned that people wouldn't collect the money that was owed to them in this lawsuit now with a bigger settlement amount. So he worked with a professor at Duke University who specializes in the phenomenon of no action bias, which is the principle that people generally prefer to do nothing over something. And the form was designed so that if people clicked away before they were done, they would get a warning telling them they wouldn't get paid unless they finished filling out this form. The result was they had a good response to the forms. They got the money out. Consumers ended up with more than double what the initial settlement was going to offer. The lawyers got less than what they wanted, and Facebook got only a very narrow window of immunity from future litigation. All of this is the exact opposite of what I'm seeing right now on the Facebook privacy lawsuit, where the lawyers get a lot of money, Facebook gets broad blanket immunity, and you'll be lucky to get a couple of bucks in your pocket, maybe a cup of coffee that you'll get out of the deal, maybe even less than that. So it's about the principle that if we consumers send a message, there are some things that we can affect here. These settlements have to be approved by judges. And if they see there's a huge consumer backlash, that is going to impact things. And as you can see here, a judge has the power to throw a settlement out or force a better one. But if the judge doesn't see people reacting to anything and people just signing up to get $2 in the mail at some point in the future, that's what they're going to go for, because we live in a society where the public drives a lot of this stuff. And if the public doesn't care, the judge is going to say, well, I guess they don't care, they're happy with it, let it roll through. Let me show you an example of this no action bias in action. In my home state of Connecticut, we have the worst power company in the world called Eversource. And back in November of last year, the power company announced that the supply side of our electric bill was going up from 10.6 cents per kilowatt hour to 21.94 cents per kilowatt hour, basically doubling in cost. And there's an out for this because we do have the option as consumers here to pick a different electric supplier. And all you have to do is go to this website, type in your address and your account number with the power company, and you'll get switched to a lower rate. So I was curious because this was probably the single largest rate increase we've ever had in that span of time. So I reached out to the Connecticut Consumer Council, which is an organization that advocates on behalf of consumers on the utility industry. And they are a great service to the people of Connecticut. I don't even think people realize what this group does on their behalf all the time. They're the ones that sit in the meetings and represent consumers. And I asked them, how many people actually switched their supplier? Guess what? Only 17% of Eversource customers did, even though their electric rate doubled. So 83% of the public just went along with getting a huge increase in their bill, paying more money, even though all you had to do was invest 5 minutes of time to switch to something less expensive. That's the no action bias in action. And this is why the cable company makes so much money renting you these boxes you don't need, why the power company gets away with it. Even though people hate them, nobody ever takes any effort to try something different and exercise their power as a consumer. So I think in the end, we get what we deserve. And if you want the world to be better, you need to take action in big ways and little ways, like opting out of a lawsuit, to send the message that you're not going to be taken advantage of. And I think there's a lot of room still for we, the consumer, to get this power back, both in how we vote, how we interact with these lawsuits, the messages we send to our elected officials and judges through the actions that we take. If you're reasonable about it and make a good case, I think there's still a lot of hope here. And if you are cynical about the way things go in society, why don't you think about taking some of that cynicism and productively channeling it into trying to make things better. Now, one consumer group that I think is the most savviest out there is the gaming community. And for whatever reason, on Facebook recently, I've been getting ads from this law firm that is trying to launch a class action suit against Steam. They are alleging that the Steam 30% commission that they take on game sales has artificially inflated the cost of games. I think this is a very weak case because Steam does have significant competition from the Epic Games Store, for example, that charges a lower commission. And what's been fun has been to read the comments that are being put on these ads. I'll give the law firm credit. They're not taking the comments down. but just about every single person replying here is talking about how much they love Steam. And gamers, I think, are probably the sharpest consumers out there. They very frequently stand up for their consumer rights. We're seeing that right now with the new Star Wars game that's been having some performance issues on the PC. Companies respond immediately to try to get these things rectified. They don't always get it right quickly, but they do get there eventually, partly because they know that these consumers are not going to let them get away with anything. And it's good to see here that this stupid lawsuit is not being received very well by people who have benefited greatly from the very low-priced games on Steam. So in the end, again, it's about the principle. And I think if you want to take a principled stand on something, do it, because not enough people do. And if more people did, I think the world would be a much better place, and the lawyers and these corporations would be getting away with a lot less. That's going to do it for now. Until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold level supporters Brian Parker, Chris Allegretta, Hot Sauce and Video Games, Logic KGR, Tom Albrecht, and Amda Brown. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to lon.tv/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit lon.tv/s.